You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Cynthia Toolin-Wilson on my radio show, Author to Author. Today, I am here with Erin Lewis, and she's written an interesting book called Firetender. How are you today?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. So always enjoy interviews. So it's always a good day when I get one. So if you'd like to start us with prayer, then we'll just go right into the interview.
Okay. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Okay, so Firetender sounds like a rather interesting book. So what is it that led you to write it?
Well, that's probably a two-part answer. So I'll start with the older part first. Here's the finished book. This book started, I'm in my early 40s. This book started when I was 16 or 17 years old, when I was in high school, which is, that's the first part of it, is what led me to write Firetender then, before it was Firetender. I just got an idea for a few characters. I attended Catholic school. I was in a Catholic, or I was in a creative writing class my senior year of high school. And I can't remember, because that was over 20 years ago, whether I was already creating these characters and writing about them and then turned part of their story into an assignment that I had to turn in, or if the assignment created the characters. I'm not sure. I actually still have my folder full of handwritten stuff from 1996.
Wow, that's cool.
So the two main characters in the book are named Dallas and Channing. And so I created them. I wrote about them. I really loved both the characters. They had a special place in my heart, and I would think about them here and there over the years. But once I was done with college, I got married fresh out of college, had children. 2 years later, started having children. And I've had 4 children. I've been homeschooling them. So my writing fell by the wayside. I put it away in a file cabinet and just forgot about it. I had a few Word documents saved where I typed up portions of it. But then a lot of people have the same story. They say when March of 2020 hit and all their activities got canceled, they were at home and they pulled out old things, or they started up new hobbies. So I pulled out my old writing and I started rereading it. And at the time I thought, oh, well, maybe I should let my oldest teenage daughter read this because she likes to write too. But then I said, oh, this isn't really good at all. But I loved these characters so much. And I got to realizing their story had no purpose. It was just kind of meaningless, teenage angst that had driven me to write it. But there was no real plot to it. And I said, what's the purpose of these characters? And what are they looking for? Because they were definitely searching for something. They were lost. And I decided, well, what everybody's looking for ultimately is God. And as soon as I realized if I could have them looking for God in the story, but within the frame of the story that had already begun, then it would go somewhere. And suddenly I knew the end of the story for Dallas, who's the protagonist. I also realized he was the protagonist because I actually, as a 16, 17-year-old, when I created these characters, I liked the other character better than him. But as I read it, I said, this is the protagonist, and this is his story, and I know where he's going to go. I know what his purpose in life is now. And so I just sat and I started writing, and I wrote 400,000 words.
Oh.
And that that has since been edited and condensed down to closer to 300 or somewhere between 300, 350,000, but it's gone through tons of edits and changes, and it's turned into 3 books. So this is the first, a little over 100,000 words, is Firetender. And then at this point, I think there's 5 books in the series because I'm just not writing. So the reason then that the second part of that answer is the reason why I wanted to write this book is because once I saw the purpose for that character's life, I wanted to share it. I wanted to give a story of hope to young adults. When I talk about it, I say that it's really for about ages 18 and up, although I could see mature 16 and 17-year-olds reading it, but I wouldn't call it a YA read.
Yeah.
There's 12 and 13-year-olds that read that. And at the start of this book, the characters are 17 and 19 years old. At the end of the book, the protagonist is 23. So I really see it as more of a new adult read. Since the main character is looking for God's purpose in his life, eventually as it goes through the series, that is what really spurred me to write it. It's ultimately is a vocation story. What is my vocation? What does God want me to do in my life? What's God's purpose for me? Which is a question that a lot of people don't ask themselves. I know I wasn't always thinking in that way when I was 18, 19 years old.
Sure.
But I think it's an important message. And if it can be told in within a story that makes it more engaging, it's I hope it's not preachy, but there's definitely elements of faith to be found in this book, and there will be in the future books in the series as well. So I think that mostly explains my purpose in writing the story. I guess I can also add that, as Catholics, we look at what are vocations for adulthood, and the main ones are marriage or religious life. And so I'm married, so I've got that experience to draw on. I've been married for over 20 years now, just barely over 20 years. And my youngest brother is a priest. He's 9 years younger than me. So I got to watch his vocational journey. So I've lived one vocation. I've gotten to watch another one within my family. So discerning your vocation is something important for me. Praying for priests, praying for strong, healthy marriages. That's about it as to the reasoning for why I wrote it.
That's pretty interesting. I don't know. I just fell into marriage. I didn't, I just assumed I'd always get married. Yeah. So I was married for 30 years to one man. We raised a family. He died of esophageal cancer. And I thought, well, now what do I do? So there had been 4 of us who had been friends. And of course, I lost my husband, and this man lost his wife, and we started going out for coffee. We married. We were married 17 years, and he just died last November. And here I am saying again, what do I do now? I know what I'm not going to do. Not marrying again, because for sure that guy will die too. But anyway, so I've actually been thinking about picking up writing again. It's, it takes time, and it really makes you use your brain, and it's not, I think people who have never written think that it just flows. And I mean, sometimes sure it does, but usually it's really hard work. And, I could use that for a while. So maybe I'll read your books instead. They sound pretty good.
Yeah. So vocations can be a lifelong journey too when things change. Yeah. But definitely using your brain to write. A lot of times the words will spill out of me, but then I spend 20 times the amount of time I spent to just write that first draft going back. Yeah. And probably more than 20 times longer, revising and making changes.
Yeah, it's not, I think people have the Agatha Christie, or what was that woman's name? She was on the TV show Murder, She Wrote. I think that influenced so many people to think, you just go write, for a few hours and, it just pours out. It's already in your brain. It's like, yeah, good luck with that. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, definitely a way to exercise the brain, both reading and writing.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, of course, I still teach, so that takes a lot. But yeah, I have thought of it. Have you joined the Catholic Writers Guild?
Yes, I'm a member. I joined it soon after I started adding to my story. I think late 2020, maybe I joined, or early 2021.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just joined it this last year. So it was. I watched the convention on the internet, and I was very impressed. Had some good speakers.
Yes, I tuned into a lot of those too.
Yeah, pretty good. Mm-hmm. So you're going to write, you figure, 3 books in this series?
I think 5. I've got
5. Yeah, 5. That's right. That's what you said. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So are they going to grow older through this process, or is it,
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the time frame of the books too is because I started writing in the late 90s. That's when this book takes place. This book is set from 1997 to 2000, 2001. So in the second book, it takes place over most of the year 2001. Then the next book takes place until about 2010. The fourth book, I went kind of crazy and I said, this book takes place in 5 days. Boom.
Oh, wow.
It's, I think 2010 or 11 was the year I set it in. And it's just a fast-paced action book, which was really fun to write. I sat and I banged it out in like 30 days. And then I've been revising here and there on it, but I'll jump from book to book when I'm revising. And like my second book is coming out in June of this summer. So it's been undergoing edits, but then when I'm waiting on that, like to get feedback, then I jump to another one and I start rereading it and making edits and changes on it. Then the 5th book takes place closer to modern day. I think it takes place from about 2015 to 2000, maybe 19. I've got a whole timeline written out so I can keep track of it. So yeah, the protagonist grows older through the whole series. So you get to see him discerning what God's will is for his life. You see him hit challenges to those, to what he wants. You see him question what he wants and compare what does he want versus what does he need. What does he think he wants versus what God really wants him to do. So it follows his struggle through all that. Because I started with some pretty, they had some pretty rough backgrounds, these 2 main characters. I started them out with a lot of challenges in their childhood. So he has a lot to overcome on his journey.
Good. It sounds like you've really planned this out very well. It's... Yeah,
I've thought through it a lot.
Yeah. I can imagine that takes a lot of time. So, yeah, I've written memoir, but I've not written novels, but I think I'm going to give it a shot. So we'll see. It sounds like it's an awful lot more work than a memoir, though. Because all you have to do is remember your life, Oh, yeah.
Well, sometimes I feel like sometimes the characters just kind of take off on their own, and I just kind of follow them and see where it leads. So I let them do the work, or I think of something difficult to give them and then see what they do with it. And generally that helps it to take shape for me anyway.
Good. Well, we all have our little ways of doing it. When I wrote my memoir, I must have had like a full yellow pad with just memories that as they came to me, I'd write them down and then I reorganize them. But you can't really do that with a novel because you don't have the memories,
Right.
So,
right.
But it's just interesting to think of how you can create something out of your imagination, write that much and continue through five books? Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
And I've written it out of order somewhat.
Oh.
I'll come up with just scenes that come to my head and jot down ideas for that. And then sometimes I will write the end of a book before I write the middle. That's the way book 5 is right now. There's a chunk missing. I know how it ends, but there's a section that needs more research done because it takes place in another country. And I'm not even entirely sure which country I want it to be. So I need to go back and do some research for that. And then the 4th book, I decided to put it in after I'd written the 5th book, or the ending of the 5th book anyway. Yeah. And I went back and wrote. It's like, I want to know what happened to him 5 years earlier when this situation happened. And then it became a book.
That's great. So, after you finish this series, are you going to continue?
That's a good question. I initially thought I have this one story of this one protagonist in my heart to tell, and that's probably going to be it. And I was like, I could never love another character more than this one. No way. So I'll just work on this and I'll just keep going with his life. But then when I did go back and write that book 4, which is that fast-paced 5-day, but when you write a book that takes place in such a short amount of time, at least I thought of it this way. There needed to be more characters in that book because otherwise it would be focusing on his every move he'd made all day long. And nobody wants to hear like that he sat down and ate breakfast unless something pivotal happened at the breakfast table. So there were these side characters that came out in book 4 who I hadn't intended at all to focus on other than that they were side characters for this story. But 2 of them I've grown to really love. So I wondered what made them get to the point they were at, because they had some major problems. They were more antagonist players in book 4. And I said, well, what made them get to the way they were? And so I said, I'm going to write it down and find out. And it became basically a book. And then I wrote a book that goes after it of what happened to them after book 4. So it's kind of like a side little series. But it's really rough. I don't know if it's going to make it like to where I would publish it, but it's been fun to write about other characters in different situations. And I learned something about myself. I learned it's not just this one character that I created 25 years ago, and he's the only one that could ever, go anywhere. I said, I could enjoy and get to know and love these other characters too, just as much, maybe even a little bit more for one of them. And that was a surprise to me, but it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it does sound like a fascinating journey, especially when you consider the length of time, that you've been doing it from the start. And, here we are a few decades later, or a couple of decades later. That's actually your life work, your life's creative work.
Yeah, with a huge gap in the middle that really, I guess they were kind of ruminating in the back of my mind, the characters and the story. And I think I had to gain life experience, which I brought into the book, because I had some friends read Firetender, and they said, I could totally see elements of you. I could see stuff about your philosophy of education, because I homeschool my children, and they saw things come in, mentions of books or of or even songs and bands of the time period. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember you talk about them because you listened to that music when you were in high school. So I think I had to build up all that, my own experience over 20 years before I could really get it all into the story and make it what it is now.
Well, that's good. It's nice to be able to spend that much time, I think, and develop things and finally have a finished project or finished product, and then realize that you have more in you to keep going. So that's great.
Yeah, I never would have anticipated that I was going to come back and I thought the book was finished. I was like, yeah, they just kind of ended in this hopeless, awful place, the end. But yeah, it's neat to know when, that you can go back to something and maybe it's not finished and maybe there's more in you. And so all that time, if you used to love to do something and you have a whole bunch of what you consider to be like idle years in between, well, they may not be idle. You may go back to it. You never know. You might pick up again or improve upon. I've definitely improved.
Yeah. As you write, it definitely gets better. There's no question. It's just the practice. It's like, anything you do. So that's good. Think of how good you're going to be at the end of book 5.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. So have you thought of writing anything that would not be in this series?
Well, yeah, I guess the other one, it has that crossover with the series where it has some of the same characters. The book that came, the story of those two characters before has nothing to do with this series, really. So I get it separate because it doesn't have any of the characters from I call the main series the Chalice series. There's the little logo that's going to be on each book. But then the book that follows those two characters after they intersect with this series, it does have some of these characters in it. So it's not really a full standalone. But no, I don't know if I would write something. I've had a couple of ideas that haven't really gone anywhere as far as like, oh, that would be a cool story. But I haven't sat down and made any notes or anything like that at this point. But I'd be open to it if the ideas start coming and see. I don't know if I would ever write anything nonfiction or like you said, like a memoir. But there's all kinds of options. So I'm open to whatever comes into my brain in the future.
Yeah. Well, you could write a memoir about being a writer and how that whole process occurred. That's because a lot of people are interested in writing. They just don't know how to go about it. Right. When I look at some of the papers I get at school, I realize they really don't know how to write. It's like, oh yeah, that's terrible. But so I mean that would be one approach, because I think you'd probably get a lot of people that would be interested in that. There's so many people that want to write, and it's like a goal they have in the future, but they just never get to that part of their life, so.
Yeah, and for me, it was like a childhood fun thing that I thought, I've kind of outgrown this. I don't have time for this. Because even before I created these characters, I was writing stories when I was little about horses and, all kinds of stories from the time I was really young. So, yeah, it's something that you can fall away from and then and realize you never really got got it developed to where it was good, because you're just thinking, oh, this is just for fun for childhood. But obviously, we need adults to write and to improve and to keep learning.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I think that's, I don't know that that's normal. I think a lot of kids, or usual, I should say, there's a lot of kids that think, oh, gee, I'll be a writer when I grow up, but they never put anything into it. So that's where you're distinct. You were doing it when you were really young, and that's a good thing to put out there. You really could do a memoir for young people, young adult memoir. This is what happened, and look at me now. It could. Yeah, I really think that could. That could make some kids listen and really try something. So I'm going to write a memoir about old age. Really, I think I should warn people what they're in for. They're just going through life, the golden years. It's like, no. But you could, I'm just kidding, but you could write a memoir for young adults, going back to your youth. So it's an interesting thought anyway. It could get some kids writing, paying more attention in English class. So
I did used to love to tell stories and write down stories about things that were happening, real people, and put like funny twists on it, like neighbors or, people at school, things like that. I don't know if I've saved any of that, but it's in my memories still. It is in my head still.
It could be an idea. So I don't think there's anything like that. There might be something out there, but I've not seen it. Everything that I've seen that talks about memoir writing is adult. So there's something to think about.
I've not read a lot of memoirs, but I've read a couple of them. But
yeah, don't read mine; you'll get depressed. My memoir is brutally frank, and I tell the story that and it is true that my mother tried to chemically abort me in 1949, and the impact that had on me psychologically, but also physically. And so I've never had anybody say, "Gee, that was a fun read." They're like, "Whoa!" Right. But, amazingly, I ended up with a good sense of humor. Or I think a good sense of humor, because I see humor in just about everything, and I love to laugh. And I think that I just think it's important for people to know how bad some children's lives are. It's like we can look at statistics, but if you have someone who says, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, maybe they'd be a little more concerned, and try to help. So, at one point I was living in the suburbs of Connecticut, and I heard this baby screaming bloody murder. And I actually called the police, and the police said, that they'd go over. And they did go over, and the woman said, well, she's just a, screamer. I'd never heard her scream before. And next thing I knew, her husband left. And I thought, yep, there was definitely abuse there. But it's like people would say, gee, well, that kid's at it again. So I think that part of what I was trying to do was make people aware of how bad some children's lives are.
Right.
And then we get upset when they turn out to be serial killers. Well, maybe somebody should have taken a little time with them, But
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting. But I've always thought it would be good, if children were able to start writing at a young age, something other than See Dick Run. There goes, what's the other one? Sally, I think. No, Jane, Dick and Jane. So, if they learn something like that, it's something that could also release tension if they're going through a bad time. So.
Yeah. The characters in Firetender are definitely they had bad childhoods. They did. One was abused physically and emotionally. One was just more emotionally neglected. One has a mother with mental instability. The other's mother is emotionally distant, and his father, he's never even met him. He's completely out of the picture. And that comes back into play throughout the series because that does do things to you, emotionally, mentally, to where he wonders and where he doesn't want to become like his father must have been. And then he wonders about where is his father. So it has a lot of emotional baggage from those difficult childhood moments. And yes, you're right, that can help us to understand people a little bit better and have more compassion, but also try to help prevent it if there's ways that we can.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Of course, so much of abuse is hidden. You never know what's going on behind closed doors unless you have a situation like I had where you can hear this child screaming bloody murder. It was not the screaming of a tantrum. It was the screaming of someone in agony. And I thought, well, that's not good. Here we go. Anyway, it's interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about in your book? Would you like to read a piece of it, or?
Oh, maybe if I had thought and picked one out.
Okay.
I'm kind of mentally away from this book. I'm not deep in it mentally now since I'm working more on some of the other ones right now. I guess I would just like to say that if anybody is watching who is either a young adult, around 18 or older, or parents of young adults, and especially both characters are male. So I know a lot of readers, especially once you get out of high school, a lot of boys don't read as much anymore. Someone quoted me a statistic of something like adults who read fiction, it's like 85% female or something like that, and 15% male. So I wouldn't say that I wrote this book for males, but the two main characters are male. So if that's something that, if there's a parent out there who's looking for something for your, 18 or and up year old son who likes to read fiction, or who is just wondering about what direction his life should take. Not that this book's going to give you direction, but that it's a fun story, but also a painful journey at times that shows one young man's journey, and some of the ways that it could go. It shows poor decision making and what happens, and how to overcome problems that both come your way unexpectedly or through no fault of your own, but also problems that you created yourself or that you made deeper. And in the end, that if you put your trust in God, then He's going to help you find your path. The dedication of it, I'll read that. It says that it's dedicated to all young adults seeking God's will for their paths in this earthly life.
Oh, that's nice.
I might put that in the front of every book. I'm not sure yet. I can read it. My ceiling fans throwing the light everywhere in in this.
Oh, no, I see it. I think that's nice. Yeah. So hopefully it will do that. Show them God's will in their lives.
I hope so.
Yeah. Good. So, is there anything else you'd like to tell us where we can order it, or?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's available in both a Kindle ebook and a paperback. So both of those are available on Amazon. And that's where all the books in the future, I anticipate them all being available on Amazon. And then I've got a website, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a newsletter on Substack. My website's author.erinlewis.com. And then I'm author Erin Lewis on Instagram. I'm author Erin Lewis on Facebook.
Okay.
So it's consistent. In Substack, it's just Erin Lewis.
Okay.
But all those are linked together on my Instagram profile. You can look on there and find me everywhere. I've got all these links to show where all of that is.
That's great. Good. Well, I've certainly enjoyed this. I may have interviewed one other young adult author, but I'm not sure. So it's a different approach to writing.
Yeah, I think it's a new genre, kind of a new book genre, which, from what I've heard, because I don't read in the new adult genre because I'm not one, I guess. But I've heard that in the secular new adult genre, a lot of it can be not so godly.
Not good.
I'll just put it that way. Not very godly.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was just thinking that. It's like, new adult. I don't know what that's going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So my hope is that if I have some situations that might come up in new adult's life and, temptations and problems, but show a positive outcome, a positive approach to grappling with that temptation, that, learning about all the different kinds of sin that can be around you and tempting you in the world, that, showing ultimately a protagonist, getting through that, even if he fails at times, overcoming that failure and coming out strong in the end.
Yeah. That's good. So, okay, well, I thank you for the interview. I've certainly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
As you write additional books, feel free to get in touch and we'll do another interview on them.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I've enjoyed it.
I have too. Yeah. So would you like to close us in prayer?
Sure. We can do the Pray the Memorare. That one's important in the book. The first book is one of my favorites for years. Okay. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to your protection, implored your help, or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto you, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To you I come, before you I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in your mercy hear and answer me. Amen.
Amen. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good luck with the book.
Thank you so much. Happy Easter.
Yep. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.